Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now the name of Cary Grant is a name which keeps coming up over and over again if you delve into the world of men's style and you perhaps to start taking more of an appreciation in the sartorial world in which us men can draw benefit and positive outcomes. Because Cary Grant was not only a highly successful movie star of his era, but he was also renowned for being impeccably dressed and using style almost as a weapon during the course of his life. A long life, but a life which wasn't without intrigue and complication. I mean, in fact, Cary Grant, whose original name was Archibald Leach, was born not 20 miles north of where I now stand in the British city of Bristol. And his life journey took him over to the United States, where he became something of an icon, not just of the silver screen, but of men's style. But during that style journey, I think he learned a lot about the way to dress to the best possible effect. And over the years, I've always been a fan of Grant's, not just his silver screen outings, but also as a man, the way he put himself together for the best possible effect. And I've cultivated, or curated, perhaps I should say, 5 lessons today from what I can determine from Grant's life, which I think may be applicable to our lives in the modern world. Now, the first lesson which Grant has taught us, and that is one of timeless style and not trends. Because I think if you look at Grant's style of clothing, which he always opted for, even in those heady days of the 50s and 60s where styles were fluid and changing all the time, he opted for classic elegance. He was not beholden to the world of fashion at all. He adopted classic elegant style, which was simplistic and very basic in its manner. And I think this really teaches us a lesson, because if you look at an image of Grant, shall we say from the 1950s, where he was in his absolute heyday, if you look at that image today, it looks equally as relevant and valid for the modern styling of an intentionally well-dressed man, exactly as it was in 1950. If I could conduct an experiment, you take Cary Grant from 1950 and you drop him into modern day London, New York, Rome, wherever. And I think if you were to do that, not only would his clothing remain still relevant because of the clothing which he curated, but also he would still be one of the best dressed men in any environment that you dropped him into, because of the simple way in which he dressed. It aged so well regardless of the passing of time. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us. Simplicity and timeless chic is always going to be your best investment. Stay away of faddy trends, because they tend to be short-lived, and if you're investing good money in them, they're not going to give you the return that you may seek. Now, the next lesson that Cary Grant taught us is again a very, very easy one to get your head around, and that is keep it simple. Because if you draw up any images of Grant from the internet, just look him up, you will find that his outfits were made of just a small number of key elements which were extremely basic in nature. And he favoured classic tailoring houses like Alfred Dunhill and Aquascutum, which were quite big in that era in which he was, considered to be an incredibly well-dressed man. But if you look at his outfits, they tend to be rather simple, 2-piece suits in either navy or some shade of grey. It's very hard to go wrong, but it's the detail, isn't it? The devil is in the detail. He avoided many of the faddy trends which were taking place in the 50s and 60s when he was particularly active on the big screen. He stayed clear of very wide or very narrow lapels. They were always changing in width during that period. When it comes to the cut of his trousers, pretty natural flow. He didn't have flares, he didn't have drain pipes, as they used to call them, the tightly cut leg of the trouser. Very simplistic stuff. So his suits were quite elementally basic, normally worn with a simple white shirt and a single coloured tie. Now, you might consider that to be the most simple suit that a man can put together. But Cary Grant demonstrated to us that simplicity is the key when it comes to longevity and looking timelessly classic over any amount of time. So it's really quite simple stuff, and that even applied to his own grooming. You know, as many actors experimented with long hair and various other, facial hair during that period, not him. He stuck with a classically elegant gentleman's haircut, short back and sides you might call it, but as a consequence, he always looked sharp, always looked relevant, and let's be honest, there was no man who has ever walked this earth who had more panache than Cary Grant. Now, the next lesson that Cary Grant can teach us intentionally well-dressed men is an important one. And it is that it's actually not about the clothes in many cases that makes us look stylish. It's the body underneath the clothing. And Grant knew this. He was gifted when it comes to genetics. He was 6'2", he was naturally lean, and he was rafishly good looking. It was the door opener for him when he went to Hollywood, actually his good looks. However, he realized that staying in shape is a game of vigilance, because it's quite easy in a world of excess as we live today to forget that we have to look after the raw materials under the clothing to make ourselves look our very best. Now, Grant knew this, and there were of course times where perhaps he'd had a bit too much champagne. I read this in the books, where he would find his clothing feeling a little tight. He would then swap on to salads until he got back to the shape that he wanted to. He kept constantly vigilant about the way that his body looked and the consequential look that it would have in the style that he exhibited in his clothing. And I can think of 3 really good reasons to follow Grant's ideology here. Firstly, health, all right? If you stay in good shape, you're going to be healthy for longer. Secondly, if you've got a good body under those clothes, you're going to look better. And thirdly, if you keep yourself quite lean and retain the same shape throughout your life, the clothing that you buy is going to fit you for longer, so you're going to get more value out of your investment. Because, like myself, you've probably got a little section in the wardrobe of clothing which doesn't fit you anymore. And when I say doesn't fit you, I don't mean it's too big. All right, it's a little bit too small, and we all want to get back to that shape that we were in a couple of years ago. And that's exactly what Grant demonstrated to us. He kept himself in shape, he monitors his diet, and as a consequence, he looked good over decades and decades. Because at the end of the day, even the best tailor in the world is not a miracle worker. The body underneath the clothing is the most important part of the intentionally well-dressed man's style equation. Now, the next lesson I've taken from Grant's journey through the style world is to age gracefully. And Cary Grant was actually extremely good at doing this, because he was active as an actor for probably about 30 years. Yet even when he was about 60 years of age, he was still able to look like and play roles of men in their 40s. He was still playing leading man roles when it's normally way beyond the age range that he was, about 60. And the way he did that was absolutely to age gracefully and just allow the passing of years add to his distinction. Now, one of the things that I really don't like seeing in men as they advance in years, and I'm in that category, I'm 54, all right? So, I can say this myself, I hate to see other men around my own age who are desperately trying to cling to their younger years by doing a number of things to try and make themselves look younger. They will do things like dyeing their hair, all right? When you see a man beyond the age of 50 who has still got the vibrant, dark hair of the younger years, it just doesn't look right. And the colour, the hue of the hair never seems to look natural too. I mean, take a look at, shall I say, Tom Cruise, all right? He's over 60 now. His hair is exactly the same colour as it was when he was 20. It isn't really. He's artificially dyeing his hair, and it starts to look a little desperate, I think, as you get older. Equally, if you've lost your hair, and believe me, I fall into that category, right? I know what it's like. I lost my hair when I was about 40, and it's disappointing. However, it's not the end of the world. One of the things I hate to see men doing is, creatively combing their hair over bald patches, or even going to the extent of having hair replacement surgery, which is hugely expensive, not necessarily highly successful, quite traumatic for the individual, and yet still you look as if you're trying desperately to cling on to your youth. When it comes to the rest of your appearance, things like Botox fillers in the face, having surgery done, or even the simple things like wearing corrective garmentry. So, these corsets or Spanx, as I think women wear them, that hold your belly in and offer additional support to make you look slimmer than you actually are. Now, all of these processes, creative as they are, to me, when I see a man looking like that, it strikes me of desperation, of somebody who just wants to be 10 or 20 years younger than they actually are. But when you look at Cary Grant, he didn't do that at all. He aged gracefully. He allowed his hair to grey naturally, and it took on a sort of air of distinction about it. That sort of salt, pepper and greying silvery hair at the temples, it actually looks really attractive and distinguished as one gets older. And I know Grant thought of the lines and the wrinkles on his face as something of his character, not something to be ashamed of or try to have chemically peeled off in some medical procedure which costs an arm and a leg. Because, it's all unnatural, it's unnecessary. Age gracefully, enjoy the passing of time, because to get older is a gift which isn't afforded to everybody. So if you're about to engage in some sort of subterfuge in an attempt to artificially make yourself look younger, please don't. It does not make you look younger. In most cases, it makes you look like an older man who is desperate to look younger, and it's not a flattering look. Certainly take Cary Grant's cue in that case, and just let time age you gracefully. Now, the final lesson that I'm going to take from Cary Grant and his style journey today is that of valuing your clothing, because it's certainly, when it comes to your style, such an important part of the visual impression what we represent to the world. And Cary Grant, well, he came from an era as a screen actor where the actors themselves had to buy their own clothing that they were going to wear in the movies. It wasn't until much later in the sort of Hollywood era where people would have wardrobes provided for them by well-known fashion houses. Back then, the actors had to go and buy their clothing, and it was a big part of their investment in their participation in a movie. So Cary Grant would come over to London, have his suits made in Savile Row, then take that suit back to Hollywood and hand it over to a local tailor who would make replicas of that Savile Row suit. And then when it came to the making of the film, he would wear his Savile Row suit for the close-ups, and then in the action scenes where you'd have sort of light stunt work or fighting scenes or perhaps rolling around on the ground, he would wear the replica suits which had been made for him at a fraction of the Savile Row price by local tailors. So he displayed a strong form of financial acumen, because he came from really, really poor stock. Money was an incredibly valuable asset to Cary Grant, and he didn't waste any of it. In fact, he had a reputation for being formidably tight-fisted. But as he went through his life, because he was fortunate enough or sensible enough to maintain the same physical shape through the majority of his life, his clothes fitted him throughout his working life. And he maintained all of those clothes, and he stored them in a large sort of lockup or storage unit in downtown Hollywood, which he would go to quite often. And it was said there were rows and rows of hundreds of suits, of overcoats and other garments, and he would go down there occasionally, draw them out in rotation, the ones which he intended to wear, and others would go back into storage. And that way he maintained this massive wardrobe of high quality suits, so he was always being seen in something different. But he valued his clothing, he treated it with respect, and it paid him back, because today, even 40 years after his death, we still consider Cary Grant to be one of the best dressed men of all time. Cary Grant's legacy is a testament to the enduring appeal of classic, elegant clothing. If you do the things that we've talked about today, if you stick to classic styles, if you keep it simple in your clothing, if you look after your body, if you age gracefully and you look after your clothes, maybe you too can capture some of the magic which Cary Grant brought to the world as perhaps the world's most classically elegant man and the best dressed man of all time. It's simple really, so why not give it a try? Well, I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. If you have, I'd be honoured if you gave it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, click subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee, you can become a patron and get the extra videos, or you can simply leave me a comment or drop me an email. It would be great to hear from you. So until the next time, take care, dress like Cary Grant, and I will see you again very soon.